What's up, YouTube? Des the Mess, back again. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. And today, we're going to talk about restaurants. Why does food service suck so much? I've worked in a lot of food businesses. I have not liked most of them. When you ask someone why they don't like working in food, the main reason, whether people say the word or not, tends to be capitalism. The one most people identify with is middle management, right? They don't like, it's the same in retail. They don't like the fact that they are a staff or maybe a key holder even, and someone above them is kind of the middle person between them and like upper management or the owners, because as they say, shit rolls downhill. So when you take all of that into consideration, people at the bottom who maybe aren't keeping up with, people at the top's demands, they put all this pressure on middle management to end up being dickheads to, entry level staff or non supervisor staff, I'll say. So those are the two obvious reasons, but why does food service suck so much specifically, right? Because middle management's a problem in I think most businesses, but specifically retail and food. Why is food service so bad? Well, let's look through my experiences and maybe I can bring some of this to light. My first food job ever, I worked washing dishes at a resort. I think I think messes are disgusting. I don't like having food contaminants on my hands or anything. I don't like pruned fingers. I'm somewhat sensitive skin, so I tend to get chemical burns. My skin dries up. I can get rashes. It's lovely stuff as a dishwasher. And anyway, I just didn't care for that job. So I worked it for one summer when I was 14 and moved on. They offered me my job back. I said no thanks. So I think about my next kitchen job. I left a grocery store, walked out, in fact. This is a theme in my life. And called my, at the time, best friend and his parents because they owned a restaurant and an ice cream place. And I said, if there's anything I can do, I really need a job. I got tired of the management at the grocery store. So what do? They take me in. Why? Because they're my best friend and his parents, and they've known me my entire life. So I'm like, cool, I get to work with my best friend. He is now my former best friend. Because I worked there for 3.5 years, and I saw the awful side of him and his family. I learned the hard way that they just aren't good people, and that's unfortunate. This is someone who I used to spend a lot of time with. We played video games a lot and just hung out and talked shit. We kind of shaped each other's politics to a certain extent. And then I saw that he wasn't that good of a person. I was developing a drug problem and tried to talk to him about it, and he told his dad, and his dad, the next day that I worked, slaps me upside the head and goes, "You're a fucking junkie," and made this whole thing about it in front of everybody, right? It was I don't know if it was busy or whatever, but there were a lot of people in the kitchen, and I'm washing dishes, and he just smacks me upside the head about it. So I was washing dishes there for a while, and got promoted to line cook. So I trained dishwashers, and then I cooked on the line. So I had people who were technically above me because they had more experience, and I appreciated some of them, and I didn't appreciate others. It's hard working on a line. It's crowded. It's hot. It's fryers constantly going. There's grease splashing everywhere. I've gotten burned multiple times. Cuts. I like making food. I like baking and cooking and preparing meals for friends and decorating and setting things up, right? My ideal is to have enough free time and motivation to want to cook something nice for myself every night. And I usually don't because I don't have the energy for it. But I really like doing it. I don't like doing short order. I don't like doing tickets. I don't like dealing with other people who we claim to be on a team and we're not. So my friend and his parents, they own this restaurant. It's breakfast. It's open, I don't know, 7 to 3 or whatever. So I had early mornings and then I stayed up late and I was just miserable from that. Sometimes I wouldn't sleep at all. So a combination of things on top of the working conditions, knowing that my friend and his parents were scumbags, just made me miserable at this job. And I stuck it out. I was getting paid cash there. The third year that I was there, I worked at an ice cream shop that they owned for the summer. And sometimes I would work. So when I first started at this restaurant, I worked 3.5 weeks straight with no days off. And I didn't really mind because I wanted the money and they needed me. And I didn't realize I was being, one, exploited, and two, that's illegal. Or I knew it was illegal because I'm getting paid cash already. So there's a lot of crime, basically. Petty crime, I guess. It might be tax evasion too. It could be worse. There's so many layers to this that made it not a healthy situation that I was jumping into and just didn't see that was red flags. So, young, dumb me is willing to be exploited by capitalist laborers who own the business. The pros that I can take from that were, like, if it got really busy, the owners would show up and they would help out. They would do register. The father would, like, help on the line or do dishes. Like, they weren't totally lazy owners. They were just definitely exploiting us. Like I think most business owners do, whether they realize it or not, or no matter how much of a family they claim that the workplace is. It simply isn't. And so I'm working at this ice cream place, and I get out of work at the restaurant, and I have a shift at the ice cream place that night. And my mom calls because my sister's about to go in labor, or she's in labor rather. She's about to have her second kid, and I called my other friend who is the supervisor at the ice cream place, not one of the owners, and was like, hey, like, my sister's going into labor. Do you know if there's anyone who can cover me? I'd really like to go see her. She's like, yeah, it's not that busy. That shouldn't be a problem. She called the owners. The owners called me back, and they were like, what are you going to do? Hold your sister's hand? Like, we're really busy. You need to be there right now, blah, blah, blah. So they lied, and they're guilt tripping me, so they're manipulating me, right? Yes, I wanted to be there for my sister. I was trying to prioritize my family, and I felt really sour about it because they wanted me to go in early. So instead of my 5 o'clock shift after I got out at 3:30 at the other place, I basically drove home, did those calls, and then drove back into town to go back to work at 4:30-ish, and it was dead. And the supervisor called them, was like, so I got in at 4:30, and by 7 o'clock I had like 7 or 8 tickets. Like, I know that it was under 10. I know that because of how vivid this night is in my mind. She calls the owners, and she's like, we could send him home. I was using he, him pronouns at the time. I wasn't out yet. And she's like, there's someone else coming in. She can work the register. I'll take the food orders. It's really slow. They said, no, tell her not to come in and tell him he needs to stay there. So I had to stay and close, knowing it was slow, knowing I could have gone home because they could have had it covered, and they were just specifically being dicks about it. So I left there and went to the hospital. Left the hospital probably like 2 in the morning or something like that, and I wrote a resignation letter quoting some of the things that the owner had said about my drug addiction. I'm no good anyway, all this other stuff. Taped that and my key to the door and was like, don't fucking call me. I'm not coming in. I'm going to grab my last paycheck and I'm done with y'all. Yeah, so that was the story of how I ruined my first best friendship. Well, I didn't ruin it. He did. And it's kind of sad when you think about that. Him and his family come from money, and I was always like the edge of lower middle class. Like the higher end of it, if we're gonna get into specifics here, I guess. Like, I never wanted for food. I always had a roof over my head. I lived, it was me and my mom and dad originally living with my grandparents. My aunt and uncle still live there because we had a decent sized house. We were not hurting, but like these folks came from real money where they had tons of inheritance that the owners could afford just not to work if they didn't want to. The dad like invested in real estate, so there was like he had lots of money and he didn't need to work, and it was nice when he did come in when it was busy, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they were exploiting me and others. So yeah, I mean, that put a sour taste for food work in my mouth, and I didn't really know if I wanted to do it anymore, but I need a job. And what happens when you're 20 something and you have a little bit of experience in a job and you're like, well, I hate this, but it's what I know how to do. You go on to the next one. So one of the line cooks at this restaurant works at a summer camp. He's actually the chef there. I don't know if he still is today, but I assume he could be. And he really likes that. I actually like that kind of work. I started there as a dishwasher and a prep cook. The next summer, he promoted me to a sous chef. I enjoyed that. I like the idea of a group coming in, right? Like, we had one group that was there all summer, an 8 or 10 week, diet weight loss program for kids. I didn't agree with that in retrospect. But it was nice because we knew there are X amount of people that we're going to serve and they get the same thing every day. There are no surprises. It's not like line cooking where someone orders a burger medium well and you give it to them and they're like, it's not fucking medium well. I'm going to be a dickhead to my waitress about it and demand a refund and free food. And then you send him back the same shit medium well again and he's pissed off because it's not medium well because people don't know what they want. Or they order over medium eggs and you give them over medium and they go, these are too soft. And what they really want is over hard or well done eggs. People don't know what they want. People do not know what they want when they order at a restaurant. If you don't know what you want when you order at a restaurant, ask for a suggestion. Don't assume that you know, please, because you make it harder for the staff, and then the staff take it out on each other because we're already under a lot of pressure, usually because we're in terrible working conditions, especially if you work in the kitchen directly. It's hot, it's disgusting, you're covered in scrapes, cuts, and burns. You have to deal with everybody else who's probably high or drunk or just in a bad mood. The point is, working conditions in most food places are not proper and they're not good for the staff that work there, and ownership and management usually isn't helpful. And then you have a dickhead customer coming in because he's hungry and in a bad mood, or some entitled boomer, and he's going to give you the third degree about the fact that he ordered a steak or a burger a certain way and you gave it to him the way you ordered it and it still wasn't fucking good enough. And I hate working in short order food because of that. So when my now boss had offered me to work at this camp, I took it up. I didn't like the dishwashing, but it was still tolerable. I knew about what I was going to get for the day. It wasn't surprises. When I started prepping and then eventually became the sous chef, I knew what I had to do for the day. He trusted me enough to leave me alone because he knew that I liked structure. I didn't realize this might be a function of my autism until later in life, but I really appreciate structure and schedule and routine. I can't initiate it in myself for shit, but I really like it when someone else is like, hey, we're gonna do this today, make 500 burgers. You got it. I will work that girl for 2 hours straight just flipping 500 burgers, and they all get sent out the same way. and then that's it. Dinner's over, right? Like maybe you're cooking veggies or fries or something, but like it's all bulk and it's all doing the same thing. I enjoyed that job. My alcoholism and drug problems got in the way of me keeping it. I probably wouldn't still be there today anyway because I didn't love it all the time. The hours were really long. I did get a proper paycheck, which was nice. I wasn't really working cash anymore, but it was seasonal work, so it wasn't dependable. So what do I do on my winters? Well, I lived in a mountainous region, so one summer I worked at a ski resort and I ended up in all of the food places. And I didn't really like working in the food places, but I liked working at the one was a burrito bar, and I ended up working with a friend of mine there who I knew from like local open mics. That was cool. I made, tacos, burritos, a couple different Mexican and Mex-Americano sort of stuff, and we served alcohol, and we got decent tips, and we got to play whatever music we wanted, and nobody complained. Still had a drinking problem, so it didn't help, but I had fun there, right? I worked with a friend that I liked. I didn't like the management because they were just middle management types. Whatever. It was a corporate type place, and that's how it was run, and I went in for my $7.25 minimum wage and my tips, and I felt decent about that. I worked at a couple corporate diners. I can say the names of these because there aren't people involved. One of my current best friends worked at a Friendlies. If you don't know what Friendlies is, they are apparently, I think, mostly on the East Coast. So when I say it out here on the West Coast, people don't know what that is. I think the same thing with Perkins. They're both corporate diners, right? Friendlies isn't bad. The bad part about it is I didn't want to be a dishwasher. I wanted to be a cook. And they mostly stuck me to dishwashing. And then whenever someone called out, they would have me do both. So I'm doing the job of two people for the same amount of money. I was respected enough there that I bargained my way up into a raise from the start, because when I applied there, I was like, "What's your going rate?" And she's like, $8.50, and I was like, "No, I make $10 an hour at this camp." Keep in mind, this is like the early 2010s, okay? So like, or well, by this point it was like probably 2013 or 2014, and minimum wage in Pennsylvania became $7.25 in 2009. It is 2023 and it's still $7.25. So again, people who work in food service who are getting yelled at by middle management, getting yelled at by customers, yelling at each other because they work in a crowded hot kitchen where nobody can stay on task all the time. We're making in that state, I should say, $7.25 an hour. They were gonna offer me like $8.50, and I was like, no, I make $10. Like you gotta pump that up. So they gave me $9 an hour, which I was like, all right, that's a compromise. After like a few months, they bumped it up to like $9.25, and I felt like a king. But again, like I was tired of doing dishes. They were like, we really need a dishwasher. I was like, I want to try my hand at waiting, and they're like, but you have this food experience. It's like you get so pigeonholed if you develop a skill, and I sometimes wonder if that's kind of a problem with like the way we look at resumes and stuff, right? When you put down your experience on a job application and you're like, well, I know how to do this, but I want to do that. They don't care about what you want. They care about what spot they can put you in based on their needs. And sometimes that can work out. And in this case, again, it did not. So what did I do? I quit that job. I stopped showing up, which was a function of my life in my early 20s, was if I didn't like a job, and most of them were food jobs, I just stopped showing up. So I stopped showing up, and they kept calling, and I said, fuck this, and I went out job searching again. At some point I ended up working at a Perkins, and it was the same thing. It was shitty middle management. I told them I wanted to cook, and they just wouldn't do it, you know? So now I'm making less money, and I'm doing harder work because I'm stuck dishwashing again. and we closed at 1 o'clock and they wanted us out at 2, or maybe it was midnight and 1. Regardless, we closed at 1 late hour and had to be out by the next. And the boss would just yell at me the whole time. You know, it's like, this is fucking ridiculous, and I don't understand why we don't have this done yet. And I'm like, there are customers in the lobby because you let customers in and then you don't tell them that they have to leave, so I can't mop. Like, I'm legally not supposed to do that. And you're like, just put a wet floor sign up, like that's gonna solve the fucking problem. I get so worked up about food because I really like cooking and baking, and I hate the way that it's been monetized and corporatized and capitalized upon to the point that it's almost unbearable to work in a kitchen. So, some point after that, I ended up moving out of the area, thankfully. I was still in Pennsylvania. I just basically moved about an hour away, living with my mom for a short time, and didn't get a restaurant job. I ended up working at 2 different delis. The first one was run by this cranky old man, and I just hated going in. He was very inconsistent about how he wanted things done. He would tell me, look, you're doing it wrong, and I'm like, I fucking don't need to be here anymore. So I didn't. And then, you know, my mom and my stepdad are somewhat friends with, like, the deli that's, like, they live in a private community, and there's a deli, like, right at the edge of it. So they're in that deli a lot buying cigarettes and food and just, you know, talk to the owner enough. So I would say they're kind of friends, and he offered me the job there, you know. This was around the time I started coming out as queer. So it was weird. I was in a very conservative area. I'm coming out as queer. I made friends with the one girl who worked there, and we hung out and smoked a couple times. And, you know, all in all, it wasn't a bad job. I just really don't like working in food business. I got tired of making shit for grumpy customers and forgetting things, and I was stoned all the time, so I wasn't doing what I needed to do. And one day I tried to not show up, and the owner called my mom, and my mom called my dad, and my dad happened to be in the community because I think he was visiting my uncle, who also lives in that same private community as my mom does. He drives over and he yells at me, and I'm like smoking on the porch, you know, and he's like, you need to go to your fucking job, and blah blah blah. I was a mess all through my 20s, but I also didn't deserve to be treated the way that I did in food business, and it really set a bad precedent for every food job that I had after that continued to manipulate me, or had shitty managers who yell at me and other staff or whatever. So I finally got out of that, ended up landing a job working with clients who had traumatic brain injuries. I did that for half a year, moved to Ohio. If you've seen my other video about how I ended up in AA, that's that story. I left PA to go to Ohio, went through rehab, did some retail jobs, ended up getting a job at a really cool place in Cleveland. I actually liked that. I didn't have to do dishes there. That was amazing. I liked cooking. I'll just say the name because I don't really care. I'm not getting sponsored or anything. The place was called The Melt. They serve gourmet grilled cheeses. So, like, all of their sandwiches are some form of a grilled cheese, and it's like burgers and all really cool stuff. I had a lot of fun working there. I made a really good friend working there. I was out as trans woman at that time, so I was able to just be myself, and they were cool with that. They respected pronouns. Really progressive place to work, really cool vibes. I was making decent money. Minimum wage in Ohio was like $8.40 or something at the time, and I was making about $11.50. So I was making good money, comparatively to every other place that I'd worked yet. And left that job for a factory, didn't like that factory, ended up getting high. Just by chance, I was like, fuck this. Um, and landed a different job where I worked with clients who had disabilities, doing home care for 2 years. This leads me up to my move to California. I was just feeling miserable in Ohio. I liked the work that I was doing. I didn't like the situations I kept finding myself in. Mostly it was a former roommate that I had. I ended up moving back into a sober house. At this point I was year and a half sober or something, and got really depressed and started doing some cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy in an outpatient program, and had some friends from, at that point it was my sober faction, my TST community. They're like, come out to San Francisco, California. Like you're miserable there. We can figure out a way to make this work for you. And so far it kind of has, right? Like I needed a plan, so I was like looking at jobs online. My one friend was like, come work at this cafe. I'd never worked at a cafe before. I figured I'd give it a try. Things were awkward sometimes. There's a lot of staffing issues. There's constant communication issues. There's just a lot of stuff that could be done better that is not being done. And I say is in the present tense. I don't work there anymore. But it is, right? Like it's not being handled, in my opinion, in inefficient or hospitable in environment. It's just not it's not conducive to someone like me who wants to be treated fairly and feel like my voice matters and feel like the things that I do have a positive impact on the place that I work. I didn't really feel that. So started there last June, and by November/December I was like, I want a promotion and I want a raise. I'm looking at other jobs. Like, here's your ultimatum: you either give me what I want or I'm leaving, sort of thing. And I got those, and I worked alongside my co-supervisor, and we did the best that we could for as long as we could to make sure all the staff that we had to handle were taken care of and heard. And we did as much as we could to just make that as cohesive and streamlined as we could make it within our power to do so. And things kept changing, and there's constantly money issues that are really none of my business, but I keep being told about. I feel like I'm at risk of saying a lot, but I am under the impression, and this is me, I've never run a business before, but like, I'm not in a position to run a business. I'm not going to open one. Like, it's just, I'm not financially stable enough to run a business. I wouldn't consider doing that, and I wouldn't consider the potential of profit over the reality and put that as a reason to run a business. It doesn't make sense to me for anybody to put themselves in debt and constantly be stressed out about whether or not they're going to make their own rent, let alone the rent of a business, and then to put that on all your employees. Like, that's not my business, and it's not my fucking problem. And I'm done. I'm done dealing with shit like that from middle managers, from owners, from whoever. Like, I deserve better. I understand if I'm working in California, the minimum wage is like now 18 something. I understand that I'm working at a minimum wage job, right? It sounds like a lot of money from someone who came from 2009 making $725. I'm making more than double that. but the economy is so different, and I live in an expensive city, so that doesn't really make up for it. After tips, I'm making somewhere around 23 to 25 an hour, and like that's garbage. It's still garbage knowing that like I'm gonna eventually have to look for a new place, and I don't know if I can afford like first, last, and a deposit on a place because I just don't make money. And I've unfortunately been put in a position where my skills only wired, excuse me, only wired me into kitchen jobs. I, when I gave them my 2 weeks notice, I sat down with one of the owners and vented some of my frustrations, I thought in a respectful way. And I was like, I would have left months ago, but I care too much about the staff, the people that I work with. Um, and that's the truth, right? Like, I care about workers. I care about workers' rights. I care about raising the minimum wage. I care about lowering rent. I care about making, in general, society a better place to live. But on the subject of working for whether it's corporate or in corporate or small businesses, you gotta treat people with respect. That includes open, direct communication and like actually listening to your employees' concerns. If your company is being accused of having a history of racism and you're a white owner, and you're like, well, we can't be racist because that's part of the problem, And I could make a list. I really could. I feel like there's this part of me that doesn't give a fuck, and I just want it to. But all of this is to say, I do not like working in food. I've never really liked working at food. I worked at this place for the last year until I gave them 2 weeks notice, and that's been up a couple weeks now. So I'm not there anymore. My co-supervisor is on to a new job soon. Most of the staff that I've worked with over the 2 years or the year that I was there have gone. And it's like a joke to me that in situations like this, people are unwilling to look in and say, what is the problem, when everyone's pointing out what the problems are, and it's just unwillingness to look at the situation as a whole and think that like more staff or more money will somehow fix it. The problem is not the money or the staff. It's the fact that we can't keep staff because the operation is unmanageable. And that's my 2 cents on my last food job, and hopefully the last one I ever have, because I'm really done with it. I liked working in a queer cafe where I felt safe and surrounded by queer people, and my customers were great, and I had some awesome regulars, and I enjoy talking to them. I still see some of them when I walk around. I love the people that I worked with and for. I do not like the way food businesses are handled. There's a terrible, terrible toxic mindset of corporate control, and that things just need to be, fucking so, straight jacket, and it really frustrates me to no end to see the passion sucked out of people who enjoy food and who enjoy food work, not enjoying it because of the people or the way that a company is managed. Like, it's so shitty to me knowing that there are potential creative types who really enjoy working in food who end up at some soul-sucking job. And that's probably true of every business, but this is just my experience within food. I don't like it. I think, like I said, besides the obvious capitalism driving food industry, there are so many intricate problems with staffing and wages, and a lot of these places are part-time, so you can't get benefits even if you want to. Like in some food jobs that I've had, including this cafe, some staff were offered like a shift or two a week, you know, and it's like I don't know how anybody can do that and not want something better for themselves. You know, if your situation's, you know, affords you to be able to just work a day or two, then fine. Maybe you're in college, maybe you live with your parents still if you're young or something, whatever. I'm someone who needs to work 5 days a week. I'm looking for a Monday to Friday. I don't want to do anything that stresses me out too much, right? And like I can already hear bootstrap types going like, "Well, you just need to suck it up and yeah, you're right. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I do just need to suck it up and be willing to work a job I don't like to get to a better one." That's 100% true. But when I get to the better one, and even in the one that I don't like, knowing my boundaries, right? Like I've heard horror stories from friends about, you know, being specifically yelled at by a manager. I just wouldn't tolerate it. I straight up wouldn't tolerate it. I'd either walk off or curse them out first. If you are a business owner, you have no business acting like you own the people who work for you. They bust their ass for probably minimum wage, and you want to come in all hot-headed and yell because they didn't mop the fucking floor in time, or, you know, you said you're going to be somewhere and you weren't there. And there are 1,000 reasons that you can be frustrated and work in food, and zero of them are an excuse to yell at your staff who've been fucking holding the place together. So if you work in food and you like working in food, great. Tell me about your positive experiences. If you work in food and you don't like working in food, solidarity, truly. I fucking feel you, and I'm sick of it just as much as so many other people are. It's why there are so many efforts to unionize workplaces. Even, you know, small businesses, people are trying to unionize or form collectives and stuff. If you've never worked in food and you like the idea of it, I would say try it out. You know, I don't tell anybody not to do anything. I'm just telling you what I like or don't like about it. The things I don't like are shitty managers and bad communicators, and feeling like no matter how much responsibility I have, I'm expected to have more. I'm expected to work more for the same amount of money. I don't like toxic kitchens where people are arguing all the time. There's a lot of sexism in kitchens. I used to participate in it, and now that I've kind of had a social awakening, I understand when to call it out, and racism and transphobia and all of those things. I feel like I'm on the correct side of history now. I've worked in a lot of places where I was not on the correct side of history, and I can understand why people don't like it. I've heard horror stories from other people who've worked in kitchens where they're like the only girl or the only queer person there, and just the shit that the cishet white guys will say. So all of this wrapped up is that I do not like working in food. I have kind of always disliked it. I like making food. I like baking and cooking and preparing it, and I like the idea of throwing a party and having friends over. If I could do a dinner party, as kitschy and, you know, status quo as that might sound, I would enjoy the fuck out of that for the simple pleasure of planning and cooking a meal for people I love and care about. I do not like serving faceless Karens and boomers who don't give a fuck about me, under management who doesn't really give a fuck about me, with other staff who might not give a fuck about me, and feeling I'm so goddamn alone and exploited that I have no choice but to walk off or stop showing up. So the most respectful thing I can do at any business at this point in my life is give them 2-week notice. And that's not because I respect the business or the people running it. It's because I respect myself enough to have integrity. So if you like everything that I had to say, and I mean everything, like, subscribe, follow me on social media, give me some cash. As I've said before, I'm doing this totally off the cuff and for free, so you're getting an hour or so of my time per video. Hit me up on Venmo or Cash App. Follow me on Instagram. I'm not very active on my public facing page, but, you know, I do post about my videos there, and I'm willing to talk about different subjects. I want to tackle all sorts of things that I relate to in my life. So if you want to keep following this journey, I'm happy to follow or walk with you. Comment below if you got anything you want to add or you think I should talk about in my next video. I'm just going to keep pumping these out as I get inspired to do so.